one of my favourites, retirement planning. And the reason I say this is because I've seen how much of a positive impact super can have on people's retirement and their lives. So even if retirement isn't imminent, it's still important to pay attention to your super and understand the role it can play in what we hope is an enjoyable retirement. And joining me today are my colleagues Phil Johnson, one of our financial planners, and Justin Colley, who will be monitoring the chat box and join us at the end if we have time for questions and answers. So for any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box down the bottom of the screen. This presentation will be streamed live on Facebook and there will be a recording available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. In the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Ngunnawal country, the land on which I work and live, and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Before we begin, please note that any information we provide in this presentation is general in nature. It's designed to illustrate what you can do, not necessarily what you should do. So please don't take any action based on this information before considering how it applies to your own personal situation, objectives and needs. Always make sure you read the product disclosure statement and target market determination before you make any investments, and consider seeking financial advice to determine your best course of action. At Australian Catholic Super, we have our own team of financial planners who can help. Phil,
Hi,
for me, how are you doing today? Speaking
Good.
of financial planners, here's Phil,
Yes.
everybody.
Yes. Yes.
So for me, this is the fun part of retirement planning, thinking about the kind of lifestyle you'd like to enjoy. So Phil, what do you consider is important when helping members at this stage of retirement planning?
Oh, thanks to Tanya. Good morning, everybody. Yes, so we've just, on this slide, we've just put up some of the things that people quite commonly do when they're starting to think about retire. And as Tanya said, we start to when we start to work with clients, we try to start with a very sort of big picture, holistic view about what are the goals? What sort of things do you want to do in retirement? Be it, a lot of people want to do travel that they haven't had time to do while at work. People want to spend time with families, and particularly find people want to, well, don't know if they want to. I think they do want to. Time looking after grandchildren and things like that, movies, camping, gardening, all the things that you like to do. And the reason we ask about these things in particular is because we do end up honing in on the finances of your situation. And of course, all these activities, we like to try to plan for how much they might cost and how they're going to impact on your future.
The fun part. Thanks, Bill. So before we sort of dive into the nuts and bolts of retirement planning, I just really want to touch this slide, which is really, why is it important to know how much super you have? Well, first and foremost, it's your money. Your super is your money and forms a really important part of your future. So you should keep on top of what your employer is paying. Imagine if your employer forgot to pay your salary. Well, by the same token, you want to make sure they're paying the right amount into your super. And currently, the minimum superannuation guarantee rate is 10% for all employees earning $450 or more per month. That's current. You should also work out if you want to add more to your super. You really should be looking at this every year and set yourself some financial goals. Ask yourself, am I going to focus on putting some extra money into super this year? And also ask yourself, well, how is my super invested and what insurance do I have in my super? And is this enough for the worst case scenario? It's also a good idea to keep up to date with what the super caps are each year so that you know how much super should be going into your account and whether or not you'll go over the caps. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more later. And for those of us who are starting to focus on retirement, it's good to see how much super you have so that you can see how you're tracking towards your retirement goals. It also really helps with some decision making for other aspects of your life, such as new job opportunities or the impact of taking time off work. So Phil, can you talk us through this next slide and the relevance to anyone thinking of retirement, please?
Sure, thanks, Tanya. So this slide is just trying to help with a starting point for a discussion around how much people might need to live on in retirement. We talked a minute ago about some of the things you might like to do, and I started to introduce the subject of, well, how much might all that cost? This is just some information that is collected by an organisation called ASFA, which is the Australian Superannuation collective in Australia. Represents the superannuation funds, and they do regular surveys of how much they think people or how much people think they need to live on in retirement, and the results are in front of you, and what they do, they divide the cost of living up into a what they call a modest lifestyle and a comfortable lifestyle. And so, for instance, if you look at the middle box on the slide, you can see that what the research is suggesting is that a couple in Australia, debt-free, would on average require about $42,000 per year for their living costs. And then if you look on the box on the right-hand side, a couple that is deemed to have a comfortable lifestyle is deemed to earn closer to $65,000 per year. And so that's the principle of the slide, and of course these are averages, and so everybody's different. So this is a starting point of a discussion. One of the things we do as financial planners is to work with the clients to try to work out exactly what each individual client that we work with might need. But anyway, this is still a very good starting point for a discussion. The figures for the single, as you can see, 29,000 and 45,000. Respectively. Now, if you just go to the left-hand box, we've put up there what the age pension is. Once again, this time let's look at the single person. So a single age pension is $25,677 per annum at the moment. The point we're trying to make here is that if you look at the ASFA moderate lifestyle, for instance, for a single person, 29,000. There's a gap, isn't there? It's about $4,000. So the age pension, based on these averages, would not be enough for even the modest lifestyle, certainly not the single lifestyle. But this is where, for many people, they can use their super to fill the gap. And so this comes as quite a revelation to some people, that the idea that you don't have to completely necessarily fund yourself. If you are eligible at some point to get some age pension, then the age pension may be able to subsidise quite a bit of your living cost. And that's basically what we're trying to say in this slide.
That's great. Thank you, Phil. Okay. Phil, what are some of the sources for funding in retirement? So this really connects to the previous slide where we have, talked about the difference, I guess, between what you receive from the Centrelink age pension and what you may actually need to have a modest or a comfortable retirement.
That's right. So we're talking about the amount of money that you need to live on. We're just trying to make the point here is what are some of the sources of funding. We've already started talking about super, obviously, and that's listed on the slide here. However, it's not necessarily the only source of funding for retirement, although for a lot of people it is. But it could be other things. People I see, they might have an investment property, they might have some shares, they might have saved some money in the bank that they've been waiting for retirement to look to how to invest. The family home is up there. Now, we're certainly not saying, sell your family home to fund your retirement as the well, that's not the message we're trying to say. But what we are trying to say is that for quite a significant number of people, funding your retirement through downsizing of your home or something like that, and releasing some of the capital from your home can also be a strategy, or something that people want to do, not just for funding, because eventually the house gets too big for them if there's no children living in the house, for instance.
No, that's great. And I suppose during the financial planning process with clients, you do look at all of those things, what
Yes,
your
yes,
clients might have available, and
exactly.
see at what point they may need to liquidate some of those assets to be able to fund those retirements. Yeah, all right. Wonderful. And Phil, can you please explain the tax benefits of investing within super for retirement?
Yeah, so this is starting to hone a little bit more on super itself, and trying to make the point fairly early to you that super, one of the attractions of super is the taxation benefits. Superannuation is a low tax investment, very low tax investment, and it actually it's one of the nice things in life where as you get older, the tax position actually gets better, generally speaking, and that's what the slide's trying to say. You're currently, if you have a super account, then the fund has invested your money, and whatever it earns pays 15% tax. So the fund pays 15% of the earnings that it makes on your behalf to the government. Now that is a low tax rate. Most people would be aware, broadly speaking, that with the marginal taxation system, that generally speaking, most people would be paying more than 15% tax on their earnings. There is some of the people out here today might have heard about superannuation product called a transition to retirement pension, which we'll talk about a little bit again later. But those products also pay 15% tax. Just making that point to you as well, because in the past they were zero tax investments, but they now pay 15% tax. The point is they pay the same as super now. However, when you retire, for instance, you can potentially turn your money into what's called an account-based pension or an allocated pension, they're sometimes called. Those investments are completely tax-free. And so, a very important point. Very hard to, in terms of tax, very hard to beat a tax-free investment. Very few other investments outside of superannuation products such as account-based pensions offer that, and that's the point we're trying to make.
Right. I think the next couple of slides we're going to talk about how can we actually get more into super, because what I'm really enticed by is this nil tax environment of the account-based pension. So I think the concept is the more we save into super, the more that we can eventually, when we're retired, get into that lovely zero tax environment. So Bill, this next slide, if you wouldn't mind taking us through, this is one of the types of contributions, one of the buckets, I suppose, or one that has, a cap.
Yes, that's right, Tanya. So talking about the tax benefits, as Tanya said, and then that sounds interesting. I'm sure everyone's thinking, how do you get your money into super? Well, there's two main forms of what's called a contribution to super. There's this one, which we're now talking about, which is called a concessional contribution, and there's another one called a non-concessional contribution, which we'll talk about in a sec. So, but just focusing on concessional contributions for a limit. The first point I'd like to make to you is the limit on that. So there's limits on these contributions, and the limit on this one is $27,500 per year, which has been an increase from previous financial years. So 27,500 is the total amount you can do. Now, those concessional contributions, as you can see from the list on the left, what are they? What type of contributions to super represent a concessional contribution? Your employer contribution. So your superannuation guarantee, for instance, the money that your employer is required to put in by the government, which is currently 10% of minimum of your salary. That is counted as a concessional contribution. So so is salary sacrifice. So many of you today would probably be already salary sacrificing some of your salary to super from your pre-tax salary, which gives you a tax deduction. Those types of contributions also form part of these concessional contributions. Extra money your employer puts in. You can actually also make a lump sum contribution to super, which you can claim a tax deduction for. All these things that are listed there all form part of this $27,500 limit. So they all, when you add them all up individually, they can't come to more than $27,500. So that's important. The second point is that they can provide certainly salary sacrifice and personal deductible contributions can provide you with a tax deduction. So they save you tax, but they do incur a 15% contributions tax when you put the money into the fund. The strategy behind salary sacrifice is to save more than 15% because that's going to be the cost of it.
Right, okie dokie. This next slide, I just want to quickly take everybody through the superannuation guarantee rate increase. And you can see on the table that prior to 1st of July 2021, the rate was 9.5%. And we've been at 10% since July last year. And we're going to increase over the next few years by 0.5% all the way up to 12% from the 1st of July 2025. And the reason we're doing this, it's because we're living longer. So the government has, identified that because we're living longer, we're going to be retired for longer. So we're going to need to fund our retirement for longer. And this is the government's way of helping to bridge that gap, I suppose, between when you've stopped working and when you eventually pass away. And super being one of those nice long-term investments, it's important that we start to put more and more into super as time goes along. This next slide is for you, Phil. This is the other type of contribution that we were talking about earlier. If you could take us through this one, please.
Thanks, Tanya. So, yes, these are non-concessional contributions. They're sometimes also called after-tax contributions as well. So now, just want to emphasise that these are the current rules. There's going to be another slide about some changes that the government has made recently, but under the current rules, these are the amount of money you can contribute into super as an after-tax or non-concessional contribution. And so basically it's divided into three main parts. Currently, if you're under 67, it's $110,000 per year. So the first thing to note is after-tax contributions, non-concessional contributions, the limit is much more than those concessional contributions. You cannot claim a tax deduction for this type of contribution, however. But you're still, hopefully, I'm hoping people are starting to build up a bit of a picture. The advantage of putting money into super is you are putting it into a very low tax environment, maybe ultimately a zero tax environment if you start an account-based pension ultimately with the money. So $110,000 per year is the limit. However, there is a further rule to that, which actually says that you can make up to 3 years worth of contributions over a 3 years worth of contributions in a single year, essentially. So effectively, the limit's 330,000, as it says in the box on the left-hand side. So it's a lot of money, isn't it? You can put a lot of money into super, and this is individual. This is not per couple. This is individual. Okay, so that's what happens under 67. Between 67 and 74, you can do $110,000, but at the moment you've got to meet a work test, which I'll have more to say about in a second. But that's the current rules. So you can't do that bring forward rule. That's the point we're trying to make there. Over 75 on the right-hand side, can't make any personal contributions. Okay, thanks, Tanya.
Great. Other ways to contribute. So Phil, if you could take us through the first couple, please.
Yep. So let's see. So far we've talked about concessional contributions. We've talked about non-concessional contributions, but there is another couple of contributions that we just wanted to mention to you today. Another substantial one now is what's called the home downsizers contribution. So now that's subject to a number of rules, but essentially, if you lived in your home for more than 10 years, then and you must be over 65, but I'll talk about the changes that the government's made to that shortly as well. But at the moment, downsizer is over 65, lived in the home more than 10 years, then you can actually make up to $300,000 contribution to super as well. And that doesn't form part of those other limits we've been talking about. That's an extra amount, okay? You can put that into super, and that's each. So that's not per couple either, that's each. So a couple could actually do $600,000 There's also spouse contributions that can be made. Now, they do actually form part of your non-concessional contribution limit. We raise them there as well, but because they do actually potentially provide you with a under certain circumstances, particularly if your spouse is not earning a large income, then you may be able, by doing such a type of contribution, you may be eligible for a tax rebate, which I think is up to about $540 reduction in your tax bill. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. It's actually, there's a question that's just come through, which is really relevant to spouse contribution. Sandy has asked, can my spouse salary sacrifice into my super?
No. So your spouse can't do that, but there is something else called what is called a super split, where I'll answer this question just generally because it's it might be something that you may wish to speak to a financial planner about, but because it's a little bit complicated. But in essence, you can potentially roll over some of your concessional contributions. Now, remember, if you remember what I said a minute ago, salary sacrifice is a form of concessional contribution. So you can potentially, via this type of contribution, achieve having some of your money transferred over into your spouse's account.
Right, a little bit more of a technical one there. Yeah, so this spouse contribution that we were referring to earlier, that's not a salary sacrifice, is it? It's the other type of contribution.
That's right, it's an after-tax contribution. That's
right. Okay, but there are still some ways that your spouse can contribute into your account. Okay,
yes.
great. One of the other things, the last thing we've got on that slide is consolidation, and that's not actually a contribution, but what we're trying to say about this is consolidation is one of the ways to help manage your super. Putting multiple accounts into one, and this may help you save on fees. However, it's really important to be sure that you check on the features and benefits of each super account you have before you close them. For example, you may have insurance covering one super account that you may not be able to get elsewhere, and so this might be valuable if you have health issues. So please check the details of all of your super accounts before you close them, just to make sure that you're not accidentally cancelling an important feature or benefit. Okay, on to the next slide. Phil, if you could please give us a summary of what's changing from the 1st of July this year.
Yes, thanks, Tanya. So this is what I've been alluding to in the previous slides, that there has been a few changes that have only just come through, and some of the things have actually just been announced in the budget even, which was only, what was it, last week. One of the things that they've actually done is they've, for those people out there today that actually already got allocated pensions or transitioned to retirement pensions for that matter, the government has extended what they 50% reduction in the minimum payment that you can take, which was a measure that was put in place because of the COVID pandemic. They've decided to extend that until June 2023. The superannuation guarantee minimum threshold just means that if you're for most people, that's when they're maybe starting or doing a short-term job or starting a career, the employer will have to put money into super. So I think Tanya's already mentioned the superannuation guarantee rate has been confirmed to go up to 10.5% for all employees. Thanks, Tanya. And then, I think we might have skipped one.
I think we might have too. Yes, I think we've skipped a few. Not quite sure how that happened. Let me just quickly. Here we go. There we go.
Yes. Okay. So these are the ones that I particularly wanted to focus on because they are changes from things which are I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So up until, this is from July, as you can see on the slide, from July, you will no longer have to meet a work test to make voluntary, non-concessional and salary sacrifice contributions to super. So I didn't explicitly say a lot before about the work test, but if you are over 67 at the moment, some of you may know that to be able to put money into super, you've got to meet a work test. So in other words, you've got to do some work. The government actually has decided that from the 1st of July this year, that work test will be abolished for the non-concessional and salary sacrifice contributions. So that's a big change for many of my clients. The bring forward rule, which was that concept of being able to make 3 years worth of contributions in a single year, that's actually going to increase all the way now to people up to 75. So that's another big change as well. It's allowing people to put a lot more money into super over a much longer period of time.
That is a really big change, Phil. I just want, if you don't mind, can you give us a couple of examples that you've seen with your clients where people have actually wanted to put such, a large amount of money in their super, particularly, around that retirement age? What would, how would people come across that kind of money?
Oh, a few different ways, but I don't know. One of the ways might be they've inherited some money, for instance.
Right.
They might have inherited, or they might have downsized their home. Anyway, so yeah, they've got this extra large amount of money, and because of their age, they actually haven't been able to put it into super. Now that just sort of in passing, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't help them as financial planners, but it does mean that we probably can't use super. But we've been spending a long time in today's presentation talking about all these benefits of tax benefits and things like that of super. Well, being able to now use those tools for a number of clients that I can think of come to mind will be very attractive to these people. So yes. Where were we? Yes, the other one, I'll keep going here. The third point on the slide was the minimum age for the downsizers contribution. It's currently 65. From July, it's going to be 60. So if you sell your home, same conditions as what I said previously, you'll now be able to also put that money in at a younger age. You had to wait until 65. So that's also going to be attractive to a lot of people who have wanted to downsize, I don't know, move to the maybe a sea change or something like that, have some extra money and they retire. They're going to be able to potentially put that money into super earlier than what they were able to. The last point probably doesn't directly affect that many people probably that are here today, in the sense that first home buyers, but might be affecting their children though. Anyway, the point is the government has made a change there. First home buyers have been able to access up to, I think it's $30,000 of their super to help buy their first home. They've increased that to $50,000.
Right, interesting. So it looks like the government are assisting people with helping them build up their super in preparation for retirement, which really ties into our next slide. When can you access your super savings? Phil, can you take us through this, please?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important at this point that people understand this term that we've got up on the slide. It's talking about preservation age. And another term called condition of release. So I think people are sort of broadly familiar with the idea that you can't just access your super at any point when you want it. The intention really of superannuation is, to help fund your retirement. So the government puts a lot of rules around when you can actually access it. It's usually generally around the idea of being able to access either close to or when you retire, that sort of thing. So everybody's got a preservation age. It's a feature of your super. If you look at your statements, for instance, you will actually be able to look up and see what your particular preservation age is. So preservation age is once you've met it, if you have then also retired, you can actually access your super because you have met what's called this condition of release. So I don't know, an example, first line of the slide, this person, you can see it, the preservation age is determined by your date of birth. So let's just say first line on the table, this person's preservation age is 58. So at 58, if they have retired, they will have met a condition of release because they've met their preservation age and retired, and therefore will be able to access their super. So that's what it's trying to explain to you. And as you can see, as time going by, the preservation age is actually increasing. At the moment, it's up to age 60. So anyone born after the 30th of June 1964, preservation is 60. What else do I want to tell you? However, when you reach 65, actually it says it right down at the bottom of the table, at 65, you have full access to your super, regardless of whether you've met your preservation age or not, or whether you're working or not, you still have access to your super.
Yeah, so 65 is like the golden age where all bets are off and you can go and attack your super.
That's yep.
So now we know when you can access your super. How can you access your super? So Phil, in what way can we access our super once we've satisfied that condition of release?
Yes, so generally 2 ways, as you can see from the slide. Access this lump sum, or do you access as some sort of regular income in the form of an income stream? So you can take your money out of super as a lump sum. However, as financial planner, you're considering, well, if I do that, what am I, if I take all my money out of super, what am I going to do with that big lump sum? You know what I mean? So taking it out in a, dosing it out in a form of a regular payment. This is the territory we're going to be talking about account-based pensions and allocated pensions. You can draw it out as a regular income as well. You don't have to just take it all out and then, pay yourself out of the bank or anything like that. You can draw it out as an income stream, which has tax advantages for you, which we've started to talk about a little bit already in the presentation.
Great. And there's just a little bit more information on this one. So Phil, what is the difference between a super account and a pension account?
Well, so the main distinction is that a super account is for when you're contributing into your superannuation fund. You're still working generally, but as the slide says, whilst you're working, you're putting money into your super. You're saving, aren't you? Essentially, that could be all sorts of different contributions. They're listed there, some of the types of contributions we've already talked about today. So you're putting money in, you're saving money. That's your super account. And we've already made the point earlier in the presentation that those earnings that the fund receives on your behalf are taxed at a low rate of 15%. Okay, so we've covered off super. Then when you retire, you can potentially turn your money into a pension account, allocated pension, account-based pensions, as we've been talking about. These will give you a regular income. You can still take lump sums out of them.
Okay.
But important point again, I'll emphasize it again, last point it says on the slide, earnings are tax-free. So regular income, tax-free earnings.
That's great. Okay. If I may, I've got a couple of quick questions that have come through. So Eugene has asked, this actually relates back to one of the previous slides about, accessing super, conditions of release, etc. Eugene has asked, if you were retired genuinely, however you later go back to work, how does this affect your access to super? It's a good question.
Well, got to be careful with this one, Eugene, because don't know all the details. Might be worth speaking to the financial planner. But sort of general answer is this: your decision as to whether you're retired is actually, from a superannuation point of view, is actually a point in time decision. So, if you've in all good faith have retired, you don't intend to go back to work, and then ultimately you do. You did meet the condition of release in good faith. Your intention was to not work more than 10 hours per week. That's what retired means in superannuation law. If you've met that effectively with Australian Catholic Super, you'll sign that on the application form to either receive your money or start a pension. So if that's if you then subsequently circumstances change, you've still met that condition of release in the past, and that doesn't get reversed. I think that's the point that Eugene would like me to answer.
Great. And Colin has asked a question as well, so we may as well jump into that one too. Yep. Colin has asked, can you use the downsizer contribution if you are retired?
Not necessarily, Colin. Once again, difficult to answer without knowing all the circumstances, but the main point I'd like to make to you there is, at the moment, it's not about retiring. That's not the driver of the rule. It's about whether it was your home and how long you've lived in it. That's what it comes down to. So whether you've retired doesn't actually matter. Okay, you may happen to be retired, but that's not actually the thing that's actually determining whether you can make that contribution. So at the moment, just to recap on what we've already said, you've got to be currently over 65, and it's got to have been your home for more than 10 years. The rules are going to change from the 1st of July. It's going to be you've got to be over 60. Okay, but yep. The thing is, it's got to have been your home for 10 years. It's nothing really to do directly with whether you've retired or not.
Gotcha. So it's a sort of slightly different set of circumstances. Okay. And look, if the questions haven't been answered to your satisfaction, please just drop us a line as well back into the chat box, and we can get in touch with you after the webinar and talk about that a little bit more specifically. Okay. On to the next section, we're going to have a look at what you could consider as you're transitioning to retirement. So Phil, can you please explain what a TTR pension is?
Yes, so TTR is Transition to Retirement Pension. I think some of you listening today would have heard of this transition to retirement, and so we're just trying to explain to you what it is. Transition to retirement is a pension. We've been talking about pensions already. This is a form of pension. The main point I'd like to make to you about these TTR pensions is that you can actually commence one of these pensions if you have met your preservation age but have actually not retired. The idea of it, when the government formulated the rules around this, was that you could potentially access some of your super even if you're still working. The idea sort of being, or maybe you wanted to slow down a little bit and maybe work not as many hours in the wind down to retirement, or maybe you could draw a little bit of money out of your super to help supplement your living costs. That was the kind of idea of it. Anyway, that TTR pensions, the point we're just trying to make to you, I've actually already said it. Taxation wise, still very attractive in the sense that only pay 15% tax. Not as good as allocated pensions, which pay no tax. So they pay the same tax as your current super account would pay. Okay. I think the other points there we might have already touched on. There is a couple of other key points about these transition to retirement pensions I probably should mention though. Maximum pension payment, you can't take out more than 10% of the account balance, okay, in a single year as a pension payment, and you cannot take money out as a lump sum. Okay. Thank you.
That's okay. Yes, and so please, take us through the slide and explain how the allocated pension differs from the TTR pension. So just really recapping what you've just said.
Yeah, that's right. So allocated pension, no tax on earnings, can take lump sums out of it, okay, and no maximum amount, whereas TTR, there's a maximum of 10%.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Phil, if you wouldn't mind taking us through a couple of our retirement products that we have available to our members, starting with the Retire Choice product. Okay. So we're on this theme now. We're moving across into this theme now, more talking about the pensions now. In Australian Catholic Super, they have two different products, two different pensions. One is called Retire Choice and the other one's called Retire Smart, as we're about to see in a second. Retire Choice is a pension, an allocated pension or account-based pension, which
provides the member with the ability to tailor the investment options in your pension, to match, how much sort of return you're trying to achieve, what sort of risk you're trying to take.
I'll just give you there's a summary of what we do offer.
Yep, so I think there's 13 or 14 different options, varying, different assets and things like that inside each one of those investments. You can also mix those investments. Financial planners will help, if you've engaged the service of a financial planner, in Australian case, we will help you with choosing what might be the appropriate mix for you based on your views on risk and return.
Great. Here we go into the next one. This is a little bit different, Retire Smart.
Okay. So now we're talking about a different pension. It's still a pension. It's still an allocated pension, account-based pension. It's just that works a bit differently. Okay. And it basically revolves around the way the money's invested. So we just saw Retire Choice gives you a choice as to how to invest your money. Retire Smart is probably a little bit more of a set and forget kind of strategy. It's not as tailored to you individually. It basically works. If we can just go to the next slide, I'll talk to that, Tanya. It works essentially by putting your money into what we call two buckets. So these two areas you can see on the graph. You've got the bulk of your money in what we call growth assets, things which, trying to generate return for the longer term. And then you've got money in a cash bucket, which is a smaller amount, which is used to pay your regular pension payments. So the basic concept of it is you kind of try to leave most of your money for long-term growth to help fund your retirement over a long period of time, but you have access to money through this cash bucket to pay yourself pension to live on in the short to medium term.
Great, fantastic. We just had a question come through from Paul, which Paul has asked, if you've reached preservation age 58 and take super, are you taxed up until 60? And I've typed back, it depends on whether it's a lump sum withdrawal or a pension, but maybe Phil, if you wouldn't mind just expanding on that one for me.
Yeah. So the answer there, Paul, does once again depend exactly on your circumstances. But yes, they can be taxable. So it's a good point. I didn't highlight it in the previous slide, but things in terms of tax are fairly simple after 60. There is no tax after 60. But if you are able to access your super, like you say, Paul, preservation age 58, if you access your money as a lump sum, then it can potentially be taxable. And there is but the government also does give you some relief on that. So there's something called a low rate threshold, which is an amount of the potentially a taxable amount. There is an amount the government may not tax you for. Sorry, that sounds convoluted, but it's actually a bit of a convoluted rule. So that's for lump sum. Same sort of thing generally applies with a pension. If you draw a pension with your money before 60, then the pension payment, what's called the taxable component, is actually taxable at your marginal tax rate, but does get a 15% tax rebate. I think the message I would like to give you there, Paul, is hopefully you can see it's actually a bit complicated. And I would say that is definitely the sort of thing that you could sit down and talk to a financial planner about exactly how it works in your situation.
Thank you very much. Okay, so just zooming through to the next slide, Phil, I think one of the most valuable things that a financial planner can do for you is to help you understand when you can afford to retire and how long your money will last, and throw into the mix unexpected events like COVID. Though financial planning can also factor in some contingency plans to account for the unexpected. And the next couple of slides will show you an example of financial projections that you might receive in a financial plan. Phil, can you please take us through these next few slides and explain how this helps your clients to understand whether or not they can afford to retire?
Okay, exactly, Tanya. So this is, number one overall big question that we get asked most as financial planners when we first meet a couple that are approaching retirement. Can we afford to retire? We spend a lot of time analysing this, and we actually use computer software to help us work out the answer to that question. And we're just giving you here just an example of how we do it and how we approach it. And we've just given you a little example of a couple that are 65 years old. They've got $300,000 each in super, and they own their own home. They need $63,000 per year as their living cost. We've made some assumptions about inflation. As you can see, the rate of return on their super is assumed to be 5%. And I think that would probably be enough to get us through to the next slide, Tanya. Yeah, so now a lot of analysis is done, but graphically, this is the output. The way to read this graph, I'm sorry, it's probably a little bit small, but I think you can, just by the shape of the graph, you can get the idea of what we're trying to explain to you. If you look over on the right-hand side, they have their $600,000. So first point to note, their home isn't included in this analysis because we assume they need somewhere to live. That's not an asset we're looking to fund their retirement from in this particular example. So they've got their $600,000 over on the far left-hand side, and they're 65, and then you can see, hopefully, that their money, which is the dark blue area on the graph, it's going down, but it doesn't run out in this particular case until age 93. So that's a long, a long time. And so that's the sort of analysis that we can do for each individual, and depending on your particular circumstance. This is a fairly simple one, just to give people the idea of what we can do. And I think if we look at the next slide, thank you, Tanya. This graph is also helps explain what's going on with the client. So the previous graph was showing, well, how long does your money last? This one is actually looking at how is it, how do you get paid? What are you paying yourself with? What are you funding this with? For instance, you can hopefully see that there is there's a red line at the top of the graph. Now that's going to be the $63,000 per year. That's the outgoings of the house. That's the money they need to live on. But then below that, you'll see generally speaking, you'll see what a purple bar and a blue bar. The purple bar is income that you're funding yourself. In other words, you're drawing the money yourself out of your super, in this example, allocated pensions in this example. But the blue area is actually the age pension. So this actually surprises a lot of people. I mean, these people, they had $600,000 in super. It wasn't like they didn't have any super. But nevertheless, when they get old enough, they do start receiving age pension. And it actually forms a fairly significant part of the funding of their retirement. And that's, in essence, why the money lasts much longer than what you may expect.
That's great. I think the next few slides we're going to take everybody through age pension, how it works, eligibility, different criteria. Phil, what are some of the considerations when it comes to accessing age pension?
Yeah, so just very briefly, I think most people know you've got to be of a certain age to get the age pension. There's residency requirements, and I think most people also know it's means tested. So Centrelink, which is the people that look after the management of this payment, are going to look at income and assets as part of their mean testing, which will determine your payment rate.
Great. Yes. And Phil, what about the eligibility ages? If you could take us through this really quickly, because everybody wants to know how old do I have to be before I can access some.
Yes, well, there's this general theme, and this is the second time this idea that the government's slowly increasing the age of eligibility for most things, unfortunately. But yeah, the age pension age is slowly increasing up to age 67. So you can see on the table below that if you're, I won't literally read it out to people because they can see it for themselves, but this idea that depending on when you were born, your age eligibility is slowly going up. And by the time we get to July 2023, it'll be age 67.
Great. And I suppose anyone who's reading this slide, if you're born prior to the 1st of July 1955, you've already reached age pension age.
That's right. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Just in the interest of time, we need to whip through these next couple of slides. Yeah. Phil, if you could just give us a brief overview of the assets test.
Yeah, sure. So, look, I think what we're trying to show you on this graph is if you look at the arrows, first point is probably worth telling people is the way that means test works is that government distinguishes between singles and couples, so different rates of pension, and they also distinguish between homeowner and non-homeowner. Okay, so armed with that knowledge, for example, if you look at a single homeowner, what this graph is trying to say to you is that in the the purple area on the graph, you would receive full age pension under the asset test, and if your assets are over anything that moves into the orange area, then you wouldn't receive any age pension under the asset test. And that principle is going to apply right through on all the graphs that we're about to see. So I won't actually read out the numbers to people, but I hope you can sort of see the idea. Although I will make the point that what that light blue area, that area there is where somewhere in there, if you've got assets somewhere between the two minimum and maximum figures, you will get some age pension out of the asset test, obviously decreasing as you get closer and closer to the upper threshold.
Great. I think many people are in couples and many people are homeowners, and I think the key thing to keep in mind is if you've got assets that exclude your home under the value of about $900,000, you should be entitled to some Centrelink under the assets test. But there's also an income test.
Exactly. Yep. And I'll just, again, another broad principle which is also worth understanding is when Centrelink look at both your assets and your income, and they actually work out a fortnightly pension based on both those tests. What they then do is they say, all right, which is the lower figure? And that's the one your payment actually gets made based on.
Okay.
Yep. So it is possible to pass one of the tests but fail the other one. If you fail either of them, you don't get anything. That's the principle of it. Okay.
Right.
So once again, same sort of logic here with the income test as well. You're allowed to earn a certain amount of money. You can see on the single person there, it's about $180 per fortnight. So you can earn that and still get a full age pension under the income test. If your income, however, exceeds $2,155 in the case of a single person, then you wouldn't get any age pension. That's how it works.
Great. And then next slide is really talking about the most age pension that you'll be eligible for. Phil, if you wouldn't mind just chatting about this one quickly.
That's right. So, and we've actually seen this figure before, so earlier in the presentation, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's about 25,677. That's what the single age pension is. The other point to make for the couples is that the most they can receive is 38,708, or exactly half of that each. So the point I would like to raise everyone is obviously a couple does not get exactly double of what a single person gets. That's the way the government has structured the payments. Okay.
Right. Thank you. Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, Phil, and who is this for?
Okay, so For people that actually don't pass the means testing for the age pension, they may be eligible for a Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. I think many people may know that if you do receive the age pension, you receive a pension card, which also entitles you to certain discounts available to you. You don't get that card if you don't get the age pension. However, we're trying to make the point you may be eligible for this Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. It has a different means test to the age pension. It doesn't actually have an asset test, so that's great. It does have an income test. It's a different income test to the age pension, and it's generally speaking more generous. You can see there, we've put it down there at the bottom of the slide on the left-hand side. The figures there for a single person, it's about $57,000, $58,000 is the cut-off amount for those people, and not about $92,000 for a couple. So you can actually earn quite a lot of money and still get that Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. What does it do for you? The main benefit is it gives you prescription medicines which are on the PBS. You get at highly subsidised rates. So that's its main benefit. May also come with some extra benefits to you individually, but that's usually the main one and the one that most people I see are looking for.
Yeah, I think that becomes increasingly more and more important as we get older. Okay. And what else? Well, look, seniors cards are available from your local, state and territory government, and they may be slightly different rules for each region. So it's really important to check with your local authorities about what your seniors card could entitle you to. If you'll over these next couple of slides, if you wouldn't mind just briefly explaining some of the other areas of advice that you can help your clients with.
Yeah, so I won't spend a lot of time on this in the interest of time, but certainly, estate planning is a very important part of working out what's going to how things are going to work in your retirement and the passing of your assets when you die. Look, this is generally speaking the area of a solicitor, but we will definitely work with you and talk to you about things like beneficiaries and things like that on your super. We can also provide you with advice in some sense about aged care. Now that could be in relation to helping, for instance, plan for this in terms of maybe you're having to assist financially with an elderly relative to go into aged care, or it could be for yourself, and we can provide some guidance and discussion around that area as well.
Yeah, it's quite a complex area of funding for aged care. And how else can a planner assist, Phil, please?
I think we've probably already talked about most of these things, because you can see things on there are talking about saving for retirement, Centrelink and the age pension, trying to help you with, work out what your goals are in retirement, working out how long your money's going to last. All those big ticket items are all the sort of things that a financial planner can really help people come up with a plan for them in that regard. Probably just worth making the point as well that people tend to sometimes think that because their spouses are not a member of Australian Catholic Super, that we can't help their spouses, but that's not actually necessarily true. We help a lot of people that are also in other super funds as well, because our advice license does not restrict us to just advising on Australian Catholic Super. And the other misconception I'd just like to point out is the one that people think we can only advise on super because we work for a super fund. We actually do advise on other investments outside of super. There are some restrictions, but it's certainly worth having a talk to us about that as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And look, always the point of first port of call may well be your local regional manager. That's me here in the Canberra region. So we always encourage you to get in touch with your local regional manager, because our job is to deliver personalised service and information to our members. So if you don't like waiting on hold, or talking to people over the phone, you're more than welcome to get in touch with us, and we can meet face to face, especially now that some of the COVID restrictions have lifted in various regions. Phil, if you wouldn't mind just taking us through briefly the difference between limited advice, and then we'll talk about comprehensive advice.
Sure. Okay. So in essence, there is a couple of different types of advice that my team can, my colleagues and I can provide at Australian Catholic Super. This limited advice is where you can have some advice over the phone. It tends to be what we would regard as fairly simple advice, which might be all you really need, depending on what your circumstances are. But it's mainly focused on your contributions into Australian Catholic Super, how your money is invested in Australian Catholic Super, the insurance that you may have in Australian Catholic Super, or talking to you about transition to retirement within Australian Catholic Super. So I hope you get the idea. It's not, they can't talk about other super funds. It's only really about the funds in Australian Catholic Super.
Fantastic. And I know those first three topics, superannuation contributions, investments and insurance, are provided to all of our members at no additional cost, because the costs are already paid for as part of the membership fee. So I always encourage members to take advantage of, having one of those limited advice appointments on regular basis. Yes. The comprehensive advice, Phil.
Yes. So comprehensive advice, as you expect from the name of it, is looking more broadly than just the money in the Australian Catholic Super. Can be, for instance, considering investments outside of super. It might be looking at a spouse's investments as well. Might be their super outside of Australian Catholic Super. Able to advise on a much broader range of things, retirement planning, and how long my money will last, and those sorts of big picture questions. That is the domain of comprehensive advice, and we've probably talked about most of these things already. It's this idea about combining Centrelink and other assets and things like that, trying to look at your overall financial position is all the domain of comprehensive advice.
Fantastic. It's probably worth noting as well that comprehensive advice does come at an additional fee.
Yes.
Phil, how do you determine the fees for advice? Because there is no set.
No, that's right. So you will get, when we provide comprehensive advice, we provide you with a comprehensive report called a statement of advice. There is a fee for that. The initial meeting that we have with the clients is free. However, if we do agree with you, or you agree with us that you would benefit from receiving such a report, we'll quote you a price for that, usually in the meeting, and then it will be up to you as to whether you wish to proceed with that or not. So that's how it works.
Great, thank you so much. Just in the last few slides, in the interest of time, we've gone a little bit over time. We do have a member portal, so if you haven't already registered, I highly recommend it. It's just like doing your internet banking. There are a few things you can do in the portal and a couple of transactions that you can make. Most important thing to people is, what is my account balance? So you can get online and have a look, but you can also make a contribution, change investment options, and a few other things there. What can you do right now? Well, it's time to take action. Log into the member portal, speak to one of your local regional managers, or talk to our financial advice team. We are here for you. We're available by phone, we're available via email, and as I mentioned before, we can meet you face to face, subject to COVID restrictions. And I believe that all the questions have been answered. Please don't hesitate to reach out if there's something that springs to mind after this presentation. And really, we just want to thank you, both of us. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for joining us today for our retirement planning webinar. We'll hope to see you all soon. Bye now.